Question number 4, how did you handle the transition from working a traditional job to running your business full time? Well, first I'll say that I did the thing that everyone tells you not to do, and that is welcome everyone to episode 0 of the Laser Dispatch podcast. You heard it, another laser podcast. But if you ask me, for an industry as large as the laser industry is, there are shockingly few podcasts to listen to as far as I've seen. So we're going to add another one to the list. Now you might be thinking, what in the world is an episode 0? Well, I've been trying to book a guest for the first episode of this podcast for the last couple months, if I'm being honest with myself, all the way back until the end of 2023. But I keep hitting a brick wall because I guess this is a chicken and the egg situation where I'm asking a guest to take time out of their day to be on my podcast, yet I don't have a podcast up yet for them to kind of check it out and see what they'd be getting themselves into. And that makes perfect sense that they would be hesitant, because I would probably also be hesitant if someone was asking me to do that. But after today, the train is officially in motion and you are 100% obligated to come on the podcast if I ask you. Obligated by law. You have to do it. So what will the Laser Dispatch podcast be about? The main objective I have for this podcast is to speak with other laser business owners, and that's ranging from someone operating a tiny little side business for beer money out of their spare bedroom all the way up to a multi-million-dollar full-scale operation. I want to learn about their backstory, how they got into this, what kind of lasers they're using, how did they get their first customers, what they're doing for marketing, what they're doing for branding, all that stuff. And the value I hope these stories and discussions bring to you as a viewer is we get to learn from people that are successful and doing the thing that we all would like to do. I've been doing this for a long time, full time, and I have some insights, but there are people who are much more successful than I am, and I can also learn from them, and I can also learn from people who have a fresh take on getting started in the current times, because, I got started quite a while ago and I might not be as up to date with everything that's going on as someone who's getting started now. I can also envision discussing, if there's any kind of big breaking laser industry news, there's a new crazy laser format coming out, or, companies coming out with a new line of stuff, having a little discussion about that. And then also probably we'll end up talking to other people who are in the laser world, but maybe they don't quite own their own laser business, reps from different laser companies or YouTube channels, stuff like that. So it'll all revolve around the world that you see on my YouTube channel already. As far as frequency goes, I'm going to shoot for 1 a month in the perfect world. I can't do any more than that right now due to my schedule, but it's really going to depend on how well I can book guests for the podcast, and I will work around their schedules, and episodes will get posted as they're done. And as far as where you can find the podcast, it's going to be a YouTube first video podcast. So the main hub of the podcast will be on my YouTube channel, but I will format it for audio only. So for Apple, Spotify, wherever else people post podcasts these days, I'll make sure that it's available on all those platforms as well. And if we discuss anything visual, look at photos or watch a video or something, I'll make sure to link all of that stuff in the show notes so you can check it out if you're interested. And that is how I envision the podcast going as of episode 0. Now, let's get into my interview with myself. Question number 1, can you tell us about how you got started working with lasers? I would love to. This was probably back in 2013. I was working a regular full-time job. I worked in the e-commerce department for a local gourmet food retailer that was pretty big. This is when I was living in Philadelphia, PA, in the US, for anyone who might be out of the country. And I was tasked with keeping the website up to date, adding products, email marketing, making sure the shipping stuff was all tied in correctly, taking care of server issues, taking care of vendor relations with all of our online stuff, anything that had to do with the web presence of the company. But on the side, I had a small handmade leather goods business where I would make belts and wallets and card holders and keychains and all that stuff. And I would sell them mostly online. No website, no Etsy at this time. I would just sell them on message boards directly to people. Reddit, a place called Grailed. I think they're still around, but you used to be able to sell anything you want on there. So I would sell stuff to people on that message board, on that website. And I also even had some goods for sale locally in Philadelphia. There was a shop on South Street called Totem Brand that I worked with for a little bit of time. And then there was a place in Old City, if you're familiar with the layout of Philadelphia, kind of a tourist area, really nice. I had a little display in one of those shops there. So as I was doing that, I also had a blog, a leather crafting blog called Make Supply. And I kept these two things separate. But on my blog, I would write, top leather working tips. I would do reviews of leather. And I would also every once in a while give away one of my designs that I made for like a little card holder or something. I would put it up as a PDF pattern for someone to download, and they could make them themselves. I would put up, little instructions. I put some instructions together showing them how to do it. And, blogs were pretty big at the time. This was, social media, Instagram was still getting, coming around at this time period. This is very early. And blogs were still a big thing. So I went the blog route. But yeah, those are the things that I was doing at that time period. And we're going to put a bookmark in the blog discussion. And because we're going to come back to this later in the story. So remember that we talked about this blog. And as this was going on, I was always on the look for, new and unique product ideas. I always wanted to make something that not everyone was doing, so I could, stand out in the crowd. It's the same thing I try to do now. And I was on Kickstarter one day. Kickstarter was big back in the day. I always wanted my own Kickstarter. I never had one, but I was looking through all of the leather-related projects to see what people were doing, and I came across this one product called the Wrap Wallet. It's probably still up there if you wanted to check it out. And this guy was laser cutting a wallet, and instead of just selling it one-off, he was selling it deconstructed with the thread and the needles and a little video on how to put it together. So it was more of an experience than just a wallet. And I thought this was like the best idea I ever saw. And I looked at the feedback he was getting. His project was funded well over the asking price, and there was a lot of comments and a lot of engagement. So it looked like people were into it. So it got me thinking, like, I do all of my designs for my wallets and my journals and my card holders in vector format. And if you're not familiar with what vector format is, that's the format that your laser needs when you're cutting things. So like an SVG file, that's a vector format file. I was already doing stuff in vector format. And so it got me thinking, like, I could do this. There's no reason I couldn't do this. I have all of my designs ready for cutting, for laser cutting. But he's using a laser cutter, and I don't have a laser cutter. This was 2013. This was well before the Glow Forges and the X tools and all the desktop lasers that are out today. and all the good information that exists today on buying lasers. So if you're having trouble figuring out what you want to buy today, imagine, what is this, 11 years ago at this point, it was even harder. But lucky for me, there was a makerspace not too far away in South Philly, from where I was living. And there they had lasers. So what I did was I just signed up. I did my training so you don't burn the building down. And then after that, you're basically given free reign to do whatever you want. You just rent time on the laser. So I started really basic. I would go and I would bring some leather and I would cut little keychain pieces. I would do little engravings on them. I would actually start selling them. I sold some of those on the message boards. I remember it was $8. Everything that I made, it was $8 for some reason. I don't know why. And I guarantee I lost money on all of these. Eventually, I started cutting larger pieces. I would cut parts for my wallets. I would laser cut journal covers. And yeah, that's basically, I'm going to stop that answer there. But that is how I went from 0 to 1 with lasers. I had a product that I was very interested in making. I had no way of figuring out how to buy one or how I would have one in my living area because, I lived in an apartment in West Philly. There was no way I was going to get a laser in there, but managed to find the makerspace, signed up, and started working from there. Question number 2, how did you come up with the idea for your business and what niche did you identify within the laser cutting market? Great question, ChatGPT. I don't know about you guys, but I say niche. I know niche is also popular, but niche just sounds fancier to me. So just know that you can use those two words interchangeably. Anyways, back to the question. Let's start with the second part. What niche did you identify within the laser cutting market? Remember how I just mentioned that I started working with a laser so I could create those wallet kits, journal kits, leather keychain kits, stuff like that. And in my eyes, that was going to be a gift product. So if someone was looking for a gift for their dad or their boyfriend or anyone really, it didn't jump off the page as a specific niche product to me. It was kind of just an end consumer good. And honestly, that's who ended up buying them from me. It's people who were looking for gifts for other people around Christmas time. But while I was working on those, which, was taking a long time for me to develop and learn the laser and figure out how I wanted to create them, I was also still running my blog, which was extremely niche. And that was for people who did leather work. It was a leatherworking blog. And what ended up being the products that really hit it off for me and allowed me to go full time and sit in front of this microphone right now were creating acrylic leather craft patterns. And you'll see them in my videos, a lot of my old videos, not old videos, just a lot of the videos that I worked on. You'll see me cutting them and several of them. Because the funny part is, before I got started with lasers, before I even started selling my leather goods, I was ordering those same acrylic leather patterns from another mom and pop laser shop because I wanted the patterns for myself to improve my leather work. Now, going back to the first part of the question, how did you come up with the idea for your business? It kind of just fell into my lap in a way. Once I got started with the laser, I realized I didn't have to outsource my patterns anymore because I had access to the laser. I could just spend some time cutting those acrylic patterns that I wanted for me without outsourcing them. And as I was posting content for my blog and my Instagram for the blog, which back in those days was just photos, there were no videos, there were no reels on Instagram yet, I would put the patterns, the acrylic patterns, in the background of my photos a lot of the time. And people would reach out to me. They would email me. They would send me a message on Instagram saying, hey, I use the paper patterns, but I like that plastic pattern you have there. Can I buy one of those? And At first, I was kind of taken back. I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll get you one. I would just pay. I would send him a PayPal invoice, just one on one. And eventually, that just became untenable because I was getting too many inquiries, and I started spending less and less time working on the kits because I was spending more and more time cutting patterns for people. And eventually, it just got to a point where I had to create a web page. So I created a Shopify site and an Etsy site basically on the same day, put up the same products on both. And I just directed people to the website. I was like, hey, if you want to buy this, instead of me doing, one-off orders for you, you can go right to the link. Here's the link. If you want to buy it on Etsy, here's the link on Etsy. If you want to buy it on my Shopify site, here's the link. And that right there is how I got started. That's how the business got started. And yeah, it's crazy. The idea wasn't what I expected going in. And those kits that I really wanted to do when I first got started, they ended up being a minuscule part of my actual business. Question number 3, what strategies did you use to market your online laser cutting business and attract your first customers? I love this question, and this is the type of question I hope to have the deepest discussion with my guests, my future guests on this show about. But before I answer this, let me make a little distinction between strategies and tactics, because I see this get jumbled up a lot, especially on YouTube with, content I see for how to help people start their laser businesses and things like that. A strategy is going to be kind of like your overarching plan on how you would like to get people to engage with what you're doing and ultimately make a purchase from you. And tactics are what specifically you're going to do to implement that strategy, which could include social media, Instagram, buying ads, doing in-person marketing, all that stuff. So those are tactics, and the overall vision is a strategy. The strategy I thought of at first was just to make sure that I was visible to everyone in the community that I was already a part of. So that meant going wherever leather workers were congregating online. So message boards, Reddit forums, Instagram. I spent a lot of time on Instagram. I would follow every other leather worker Instagram account. I would use the hashtags, hashtag leathercraft, hashtag leatherworking, and just make sure that my content was always in front of people that could be potential customers for me. And while I was doing this, I wasn't just posting advertisements. I wasn't just taking a picture of my acrylic templates and posting and saying, hey, buy this, buy this, buy this. No, I was creating content. I was mixing in content that was relevant to the community that other leather workers would like, that maybe had nothing to do with the products that I was offering. I found an awesome new leather supplier. I would create content around that and share that with the community. I wanted to be helpful to everyone. Because, we all hate being sold to online. When you see an ad from a random company come up on your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed, we tune it out at this point. We don't want to see it. We're so used to being marketed towards that we hate it and we just tune it out. So to get around that, I would make sure that I was embedded in the community. I was helpful. I was a resource for people. If people asked me questions, I would answer them. And when it comes to my specific products, I did look to target more of the beginner side, because when you're getting started, it's overwhelming and you're just looking for something to get moving. Like you bought some leather, you bought some tools, and you're like, well, I don't know what to make because, I'm not good at designing a card holder. So those people usually go out and find one to download or buy. And I wanted to be that resource that they went to. So I made very basic designs. I made full-length video for how to put it together. I assumed they knew nothing, and I took people from beginning to end on how to put it together. And I made it affordable to someone who was just getting started. So it would kind of be like a no-brainer. Because there's a big distinction between doing leather work, the actual craft, and designing something on a computer, designing a wallet, designing a journal on a computer. These are two different things, right? So you might not want to spend time on the computer designing your own wallet. You just want to get working. So the strategy I used was to create all of that content, really targeted towards the beginner leather crafter, someone who might need someone else's designs to start working. And then tactics wise, I would post on mainly Instagram, mainly Reddit, mainly Pinterest, and YouTube. YouTube, I didn't really market that much. It was kind of just where I kept my full-length video on how to put the product together. YouTube was a much different landscape in 2012, 2013 era, much different. There wasn't a lot of, content like there is now. So I just needed somewhere to put the video. And then I would create a page on my blog saying how to make this type of card holder. I would put all the links for all the tools I used, the leather. Again, I'm being helpful for people who don't know where these things can be bought. I'm sharing my knowledge for where you can buy these things. A link to my Etsy shop, a link to my Shopify site where you can buy the pattern, embed the video so they can watch the video right there, and do a little write-up on the product and take pictures. I would take those pictures, I would post them on Instagram, showing, making the card holder, give people a way to feel like they could see themselves doing that project. And then I would also, when I was done all of that, I would also make a pin for Pinterest and post it to my Leathercraft inspiration board. Pinterest is a huge driver of traffic for me. And if you're in the craft space at all, I would definitely reconsider if you're not on Pinterest yet. So that is the overall strategy I used. I just made sure that I was in front of all the people that I thought would be my customer base. If you're having trouble figuring that out for yourself, and if you're just looking to target people who are local to you for local laser cutting jobs, local engraving jobs, where do the people who are local to you hang out online? Facebook groups specifically for your neighborhood and for your city, Instagram tags. There are probably other message boards if you want to go that route. There's a Reddit subreddit. You have to figure out a way to embed yourself in that community without feeling like you're just looking for sales all the time. Just become a part of the conversation, and then things will develop from there. Question number 4, how did you handle the transition from working a traditional job to running your business full-time? Well, first I'll say that I did the thing that everyone tells you not to do, and that is quit your full-time job before you're really making any money on your side job. I'll give myself some credit that it wasn't completely random. It was a calculated decision, but it was still, looking back, pretty irresponsible to do. This was July of 2015. That's when I quit my full-time job to run Make Supply, which was my laser business, full-time. And I was, working in the e-commerce department for that business. And if you know anything about e-commerce and retail, especially retail seasons, Q2, which is summer, that's when planning for Q4 starts. So we were really about to, double down and get ready for Q4. And I just didn't have another Q4 in me. It was absolute madness in that department from September until January, essentially. And I had been through a couple already. and I just didn't have another one in me. But I also liked the people I worked with, and I didn't want to screw them over. It wasn't anything against my coworkers and my managers and all that. So I made a decision to give this thing a shot full time in the middle of the summer. I was only making probably a couple $100 a month up until that point, because I didn't really have the time. I was with the full-time job. I could only get to the laser sometimes after work, but before the makerspace would close, and then sometimes on the weekend. I didn't have a whole lot of time to really dedicate it and come up with new products and all that. But the calculation I made was, I'm still pretty young. I was 25-ish at the time, I think. Very low overhead. I had no kids. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we lived in split an apartment in Philly. We had no car. We didn't live in an extravagant lifestyle. So if I was going to make a move like this and give this a shot, now was the time, before, the kids, the mortgage payment, the car payments, and all that. That really changes the calculation. So I remember putting in my 2 weeks, scariest moment of my life. I still remember it, sending that message to my manager and just being like, once I send this, there's no going back. I have to do this. I was confident that I could make it work, but there's still something in the back of your head. You're just like, did I just completely screw myself by doing this? And the transition was pretty seamless, actually. I remember my last day was a Friday, and I did not even wait until Monday to get going. I was off work. I left for my last day, and I started working immediately that night. I was getting ready to crank out new designs. I started booking more time at the laser during the day, because that, the schedule was much freer to book time on the lasers during the day, obviously, because most people are at work. I just went crazy. I just put my head down and started working. And, by the time Monday came around, my first actual work day as a business owner, I guess you could say, as a full-time business owner, I was ready to go, and I just kept cranking stuff out. Yeah, I mean, the weirdest part is being around during the day, because I don't have a 9 to 5. I'm just around during the day and in the world. I worked in my basement at the time, and I would just go to the shop or go to the coffee shop and pick something up for lunch. And that's the biggest awkward transition, is just being around during the day. Now I don't even think about it, because it's been, I guess it's going to be 9 years this summer since I've worked a full-time job. And I shudder to think what would happen if I had to go back. I'm positively feral at this point. No one would hire me to do anything. But yeah, now I'm in my garage every day. It's very normal to me now. But the transition, I did not wait. I did not wait at all. I just seamlessly went, and it worked out. The more time I spent working on my products and working on my website and working on my blog, and more time I spent at the laser, I got better using the laser. I got faster, and it transitioned to more work. And eventually I had enough savings for about 6 months before it would start to get tight financially. So that was kind of the end of the year. So I gave it myself to the end of the year. I was like, if I am nowhere at the end of 2015, then I will consider finding a job again. But it worked out. I got to ride the holiday season wave for 2015, which I was anticipating. And that boosted me enough to then keep me going into the new year. And yeah, it worked out. It worked out. It took a while to get back to the amount of money that I was making at my day job. But again, that was a calculation. I knew that was going to happen. I had to cut some expenses, and I couldn't go get beers every Friday. That's the kind of trade-off I had to make. And I was more than willing to make it because I really wanted this. Question number 5, why did you give up your workshop? This is one I get a lot in comment section and in emails, actually. For a little backstory, I worked in the makerspace for 2.5 years, split between the makerspace and my basement to run the business. And eventually that's, as I got going and I got more established, that became more and more untenable. I had to cut a massive amount of acrylic each time I went to the laser, pack it into a giant bag, and then bring it back to my apartment to ship out orders. And yeah, it was getting really annoying. In the beginning, it wasn't so bad because I wasn't doing a lot of volume, but the volume really increased. So I started looking for a workshop for myself because I wanted to buy my own laser. I knew that would eventually save me money in the long run, and it would allow me to expand and do more work. So I was looking around. I was still in Philly. I was looking around, and there were a lot of cool places in my price range that I set. But the problem was, since I knew I wanted to get a mid-range CO2 laser, so it's one of the bigger ones, that's a floor model, it sits on the floor by itself, like the Boss I have over here. I don't even know if there were desktop lasers other than the K40s out at this point, but I couldn't use a K40. I knew that I needed to be able to have easy access to the street, at least to get the laser in there, and I needed like double doors to get through into the workshop, and it was kind of limiting my selection. I would go to a place and it would have, like a tiny little third floor walk up or something like that, and I was like, no, this isn't going to work because I won't be able to get my laser up here. And I also needed the ability to modify the electrical a little bit so I could have enough breakers and everything for what I was doing. But I ended up looking at a place in a really cool building called the Thebach Building, BOK. Basically, it was an old Art Deco high school from like the 20s or something that was decommissioned in the early 2000s, I believe, or something like that. And instead of just letting it rot away, someone bought it and they converted every classroom and every space in the building into a different small business. So bakery, woodworkers, my business, and eventually tattoo studios, everything, restaurants, everything you can think of. It's a really cool place. If you're ever in Philly, go check out, especially when it's nice weather, go check out the Thebach Building. You can go to the rooftop bar, best view of the city. Anyways, I went to see a space there. Room 401A was my room. And it was 1,000 square feet, way more room than I could ever use at that point. Beautiful, wide open windows. I had awesome neighbors. I had a woodworker across the hall from me, a bakery right down the hall from me. Awesome spot. And I operated there for about 4 years. I bought my laser. I got it up in the room, and I worked there for 4 years, right until like the middle of COVID, I would say. And as what happened with a lot of us during COVID, it affected business. I was probably in my heyday up until that point. My business didn't completely tank, but it really got us thinking. We wanted to move out of the city. So we found a house in New Jersey, which is right across the bridge from Philly, about 15, 20 minutes away. And I knew that with that change was going to be the end of the workshop because it was already becoming too expensive for me. Paying rent on your apartment, paying all your utilities on your apartment or your house, paying all your insurance, paying all your business taxes, and then on top of that, paying rent for a 1,000 square foot workshop, and then paying utilities and insurance for that. It was always kind of like a burden to me. It was double, almost triple the price that I wanted to spend, but I really wanted to get out. So I bit the bullet and I did it, and I don't regret it, but it was definitely way more money than I should have spent. And I always tell people now, keep your overhead as low as you possibly can. Work in your house, work in your garage if you can. The workshops are great, but you're really putting yourself under the gun when you do something like that. And yeah, that's it. Basically, all those things kind of came together at once. I knew that if we bought a house, that I was going to make sure it had a garage. So I had this garage. This was a completely bare garage, the space you see behind me. Insulated, drywall, heating, air conditioning, its own electrical panel, insulated garage doors. Yeah, I'm pretty set up. I'm set up pretty nice in here. And yeah, I shrank down from 1,000 square feet to about 375 square feet, but I definitely wouldn't change it. And the experience was a good experience to have. I'll say that. I won't make that mistake again, but it's a great experience. Last question, number 6. Can you share any memorable customer stories or experiences that have stood out to you over the years? Yes, I have one very specific customer story that I still think about to this day. Probably happened 6 years ago or so. This was back in my early workshop days. The transition between the makerspace and my workshop was kind of a long process, actually. It took me a long time to get set up fully. So a lot of that time period's a blur. But I was answering emails one day, and normally it's customer issues, refunds, shipping issues, stuff like that. But every once in a while, someone will just send me a nice message thanking me for the designs, showing me pictures of the stuff that they made. That's really cool. I like that stuff. And I got a message from a guy. I hope I don't butcher the story too much, but he had ordered some of my templates, and he was deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East, and he got injured, had some resulting PTSD, and now that he was back, he was struggling to hold down a full-time job. So he was using my patterns to make wallets and card holders and keychains and all that stuff, and selling them locally at a weekend market, a recurring weekend market. So not really a craft show. I'm not exactly sure what you would call it. And him being able to sell these products was earning him enough money to float himself while he was recovering and working on getting a full-time job. And he was explaining, he was just saying, hey, thanks for the wallets and thanks for the products. They've allowed me to do this while I'm recovering. And I just didn't even know what to say. I'm like, you're thanking me for creating it was hard for me to accept him thanking me for this. And it's just crazy. It really makes you think, when you're creating content, especially the stuff that I'm doing, it seems so inconsequential, making little wallet designs and stuff, that you don't know where your content and your products will end up eventually. And something like this, I never expected to hear. And it was just really cool. And I printed out the email. I have it somewhere packed away from moving. But I definitely want to find that and hang it up somewhere. But yeah, that is by far the most memorable customer story I've ever gotten over the years, because the majority are just people asking for refunds and stuff. No fun. That's it. Episode 0 of the Laser Dispatch podcast is officially in the books. It's actually much harder to interview yourself than I thought it would be. But next time you see an episode posted for the podcast, there will absolutely be a guest, not just me. And if this is something you might want to listen to, make sure you hit the subscribe button there. Or if you're listening to this on an audio podcast platform, make sure to subscribe to whatever platform you're consuming this content. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you next time.